What's up everyone, Lance Hedrick here. Now considering that my first video on YouTube was posted just about 3 years ago to the day, I figured it was finally time to do a little introduction to myself. There is that dangling question of, well, who are you to say this? So I figured I would take some time, tell you a little bit about my history in coffee, what I've done, and what I plan to do in the future. Now I'm not sure where you're at in the world, but for where I'm at, it's starting to get really hot. Now I started in coffee about a decade ago. At the time I was working in academia, I was pursuing my master's degree and took a part-time job at a local coffee house in Arkansas. I was a teaching assistant and a graduate assistant to two different professors then, and so I needed a really flexible job while I commuted to graduate school, and barista gig fit the bill. I began working at this cafe in Searcy, Arkansas, where we were serving pretty much a commodity style coffee that was really darkly roasted, and I just didn't like it. Within a week or two, I was already pouring some pretty decent latte art. Now this was back in 2014 and had no social media at the time, but I continued to advance in this latte art based off of directives from the guy who hired me, which is also a good friend of mine named Zach Kelly.
I should have swirled the espresso more. There's some bubbles in the crema.
The following March, I actually started an Instagram. That was my first foray into social media because a friend convinced me to post my latte art there. And over the months, I started to get featured on different accounts because there still weren't very many people posting on Instagram with regards to latte art and videos of latte art. Later that year, I was actually featured by Instagram as a top 10 coffee account in the world, which was really sick. And I gained a few thousand followers from that, which was a really cool boost, and ended up getting to around 20 or so thousand followers there. And that's around the time I actually had my first cup of specialty coffee and actually began to enjoy drinking coffee. Okay, well, bon appetit down the hatch. That first cup, ironic though it is, happened to be from Onyx Coffee Lab, my current employer that I've been with for the past 6 years. Oh, the aftertaste is... It was my first cup of specialty coffee. It was a naturally processed Ethiopia Guji Hambla, and it blew my mind. I'm getting chills. I'm starting to sweat. This is not a joke. This isn't a joke. I'm gonna get sick. All around this time in early 2016, I also was promoted to being the trainer, the head trainer of the shop I was at. I was getting really into extraction science. I was following everything that Matt Perger and Barista Hustle was putting out. I was on their original email chain, and I read everything from Scott Rayo and everything else I could get my hands on, which admittedly at the time was not much, but anything that was out there I would grab and read. And it's because I was now hyper-focused on this incredibly complex beverage. This is something a lot of you have been wanting for a while, and I wanted to wait until a few of the previous videos. And even though I'd been accepted into my PhD program to continue education, I just dropped everything and was like, I'm doing coffee forever. So that year started a pretty decent stint of just working as many shifts at as many places as I could in order to make ends meet as I figured out how I could have a career in coffee without going broke. And then a person reached out who was trying to open a coffee shop. I agreed and came on board to help open it. So I chose the equipment, I helped with the bar layout, I hired the staff, and I managed it for 8 months before I would eventually take a job at Onyx Coffee Lab doing wholesale. So in March of 2018, hopped over to Onyx, and that's where I've been ever since. My role has kind of evolved and changed over time. At one point I was director of wholesale, then I stepped down from that, and now I'm doing West Coast wholesale, international wholesale, as well as some brand direction, which has been really fun and really fulfilling, and I still do that to this day. That's my bulk of my work hours in a week. I love John and Andrea who run the company, and I'm stoked to be there. I did the United States Brewers Cup competition back in 2019, 2020, and the two attempts I made at it, I got third and second respectively. And the most recent one in 2020, I created a brew process where I removed fines during the process using a mesh filter, and Scott Rayo was there and actually made an Instagram post about it. And that was kind of my first step into like really embracing the nerdy aspect of things. I had people reaching out to me assuming I knew a lot more than I did. Don't get me wrong, I'd been reading everything I could, but there was a whole other element of coffee that I'd yet to deep dive into. Within a few months of that competition, I got really intensely into filling all of my free time, anytime I had, with coffee. Is this something that you need to include in order to even out your extraction? Following year in March of 2021 is when I would actually start my YouTube channel. What's up? My name is Lance. During COVID, I was doing some online classes for Williams-Sonoma and Breville, so I was getting really comfortable in front of a camera, teaching all the basics of how to use an espresso machine. Also during that time, there are a lot of coffee companies that will teach you, but you'll have to sign something that you won't spread how they teach. It's a really weird gate-kept industry, and so I wanted to make it so it was open to everyone. And thankfully, the people at Onyx were absolutely fine with it and are very supportive. In fact, John and Andre are in my Patreon YouTube channel, where I'm able to take my experience in coffee and make it accessible not only to home enthusiasts. The original impetus was to democratize coffee education so that baristas and coffee professionals could pick up that torch and they could, forge their own way. They'd be able to get raises or promotions, or they could even get a job if they didn't have one. I want to make this education as accessible as possible. So I made my first video, which was how to steam milk. That seemed to be one of the most confusing things for new baristas. They were wasting time not being able to get their milk texture right, so they were relegated to the cash register. They were never able to really expand. So I made that video, then followed it up with the tutorials on espresso parts 1 and 2, and did some latte art and a guide to that, because that's a fun thing for baristas to do on shift, and it's a thing that a lot of you all enjoy as well. We don't want that. We want to be able to see the side of the pitcher. So if you're swirling and you can't see the side of the pitcher through the milk, you're too thick, baby. All right, so here we go, right here. I'm really proud that a lot of shops actually use my curriculum online for their training, but a lot of home enthusiasts were starting to follow me and were requesting, can you tell me about this machine? Can you tell me about this? So then I started to dive into other things. I had access to some home equipment. I personally had a couple of machines at home, and then Onyx had some that I was able to use, and I started making reviews and different things like that. And it just kind of continued. Send them these. I immediately was taking on this rule where I was not ever going to do a review on request. I was never going to show a review to any type of distributor or manufacturer, and I was never going to take a paid review. And I never have, and I never will. But what are my thoughts on it? Well, I guess we're gonna find out. Now, during this time, I wasn't just obsessing over all the minutia. I also was helping to coach Andre Allen in the Barista Championship. When I started at Onyx, she immediately wanted me to help her with her latte art portion. Then over the years, it kind of evolved, and I was able to help in other aspects until eventually she ended up winning the United States Barista Championship and ending up getting second in the world in Milan a couple of years back. The following year, I was in Morgan Eckroth's, or Morgan Drinks Coffee. I was in their coffee shop, asked them, what are you doing for competition this year? Morgan had no idea, so I called John. I was like, hey, can we sponsor this coffee? So the response was, well, if you help. So I was coaching Morgan. Morgan won United States Barista Championship, and then we went and got second in the Worlds at Melbourne. I then became acquainted with Jonathan Gagne, who's an astrophysicist in Canada that spends a lot of his free time doing science for coffee. I met Samo Smirke, who's a chemist in Switzerland. I met Dr. Christopher Hendon, who wrote the book Water for Coffee and has published some articles, and a slew of other people who are putting scientific endeavors into coffee, trying to blend the two because there's so little research in the field of coffee. I did not direct dose into portafilters. This is why context is so. Every video you see me put out that is steeped in science is actually up to date with the most modern understanding of science. I'm not just coming out here and speculating, and if I am, I always preface it with, this is speculation. I've done some things with some machines that I've made very explicit, like helping develop the X-Bloom or helping with the Pietro Pro Brew Burrs, and some secret things that I've kind of alluded to in the past. But for the most part, I stay as strictly separated from brands as possible. Working in the coffee industry for 7 years before starting YouTube, I had obviously met many of the manufacturers at different trade shows and expos, and I had dinners with them. My company might work with some of them because we have to have machines in our shop. And so I have personal relationships with some of these people, and I've tried to explicate that in various ways, and how that's not affecting what I'm doing with the product. And the proof is that I have negatively reviewed products of people who I would consider friends. Whenever I first was getting this, I initially, everything that I am now getting in, I am purchasing myself, which has been an incredible thing thanks to my Patreon. But let's just get something clear, elephant in the room, calling a spade. There's no such thing as a complete lack of bias. Everyone has a bias in some way or another. You might say, oh, you got that free, you're biased. Or, oh, you bought that, you're biased. Or because you put your money towards it and you want it to be good. I have negatively reviewed things I've gotten for free and negatively reviewed things that I paid a lot of money for. And I haven't reviewed some of the things I paid a lot of money for because I maybe didn't see the point in reviewing it if it didn't have a lot of hype around it. And I've not reviewed many of the things I've gotten for free because I do what I want here. If you're curious about the direction my videos take, it's because I'm very ADHD, very neurodivergent, and I can only continue doing this if I'm enjoying it. So I only ever pursue things I'm enjoying in the moment. So there's never a time I just pick something up because it's the zeitgeist and I have to do a video on it. It's whether or not my interest is there. That's why randomly you'll see a video on 70-year-old espresso machines, or then you'll see in a row multiple videos based in data, because recently I've been hyper-focused on being able to just do rote things over and over again to collect data. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Olympia Cremina Express. That's because I follow the dopamine. That's kind of a little look into me. It's probably longer and more arrogant than I meant for it to be, filled with hubris, what can I say? But now you at least somewhat know the answer to the question, who am I? Who am I? I am the Birdman! That's about it. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for indulging in this little bit. And I hope that gives you a little insight into who I am and what I've done and what I'm hoping to do, which is just to continue to democratize coffee, trying to help improve systems, trying to put out data that might help manufacturers make better things for the future, trying to spread the love of specialty coffee. And hopefully this year I'll be able to go to some farms in order to really focus some of the stories onto producers themselves. But other than that, I hope that you all brew something tasty today. And cheers.